I just love you.
We ain't got no fences here at Camp 8. We don't need no fences. We got us the gun line.
Tell them about the gun line, boss.
This is the gun line. It runs from shack to shack, clear around the yard. You are now inside the gun line.
There isn't much that annoys me. I've been trapped in airplanes with screaming babies, and I've stood in long lines without losing my cool. However, there is one thing that does annoy me: black conservatives. Listening to their critiques of social progression and civil rights in America usually leaves me feeling a little upset. Their extreme embrace of individualism and their open rejection to identify with the rest of Black America usually leaves me dumbfounded. In this video, I want to explore the subject of the Black conservative. First, going to examine Black conservatism from a historical and chronological perspective. Next, we'll discuss the primary narratives of Black conservatism. We'll also explore the idea of wealth-induced Black conservatism. Lastly, we'll explore Black conservatism utilizing the concept of Duboisian double consciousness.
I love this guy right here.
Black conservatism is not a new phenomenon. Most of us are familiar with how free blacks purchased family members and loved ones' freedom before the Civil War. Most of us are unaware that some free blacks enslaved other black people. Over 6,000 black slaveholders lived and farmed around cities like Atlanta, Charleston, and New Orleans. These black slaveholders treated their slaves just as poorly as the whites. Like whites, black slaveholders wanted to preserve the social order and continue to make profits from their acquisitions. In New Orleans before the Civil War, there were more than 850 free blacks in the city. More than half of them enslaved other blacks. Black conservatives defended slavery as the proper status for the black majority. John Chavis is one example. Chavis was a free black who fought with the Continental Army during the American Revolutionary War. Chavis later became the first African American to attend college. In 1831, Chavis denounced Nat Turner's rebellion and later voiced his opposition to emancipation. He encouraged his white friends to withstand the abolitionists, and he suggested that blacks should accept enslavement forever. The early black conservatives were down to do whatever it took to preserve the system of enslavement as long as they remained privileged separately over other blacks. Black conservatives joined militias and federal agents and fought alongside whites to combat slave revolts. They even fought on the side of the Confederate Army during the Civil War. In New Orleans, one such group was the self-proclaimed mulatto conservatives who organized themselves into regiments ready to defend the old Southern way of life. After the Civil War, black conservative politicians became elected to Congress. These early black politicians did very little to solve the problems black Americans were facing. They focused on securing benefits for themselves by favoring whites as much as possible. Black conservatives after the Reconstruction period were different from previous black conservatives. Best represented by individuals like Booker T. Washington, these black conservatives believed that black progress should be slow. Washington emphasized blacks should educate themselves and prove their worth with hard work. Washington's position was conservative, but it was also solution-oriented. This form of black conservatism had a base of supporters who agreed with the views of Washington. This conservative approach was not just pragmatic, but also a means of survival for black Americans. Many whites were afraid of black progress and lashed out at the black society through various terrorist groups like the KKK and the White League. Washington's conservative stance was grounded in gradual black progress and advancement. Black conservatism during Washington's time is different from contemporary black conservatism. However, black conservatives of today attempt to persuade the public otherwise.
During Jim Crow, the black family was together.
That's right.
During Jim Crow, more black people were not just conservative, because black people always have been conservative-minded, but more black people voted conservatively. And then H.E.W., Lyndon Johnson, and then you go down that road, and now we are where we are.
They have all made these disgusting comments about the black family and black fathers and black mothers, and black fathers must stay with black mothers and black marriages, yet they are all partnered with women who are not black. So it's very perplexing to me that you have these huge indictments of the black family and you aren't partnered with the black person. If you have this great investment in it and you are making yourself an expert on it, then I would think that that would be important to you in your own personal life, but it isn't, because it isn't about the black family. Because if it was about the black family, you would care about fair housing, fair wages, healthcare, voting rights.
From the late 1880s to the 1960s, conservatives ignored the violent racial caste system applied to black Americans. In the 1980s, conservative black intellectuals rose to form a new leadership sector in black America. These new black conservatives are not conservatives and should be more appropriately called pseudo-conservatives. They are pseudo-conservatives because they attest to a fabricated form of conservatism that does not emanate from a base of constituents. Black conservatism in the past evolved naturally out of the malicious powers of white supremacy's opposition. Instead, the new fabricated version of black conservatism has evolved from the needs of special interest groups and political calculators. A small number of black conservatives, led by figures like Thomas Sowell, Shelby Steele, and Clarence Thomas, have had a significant political and social presence in America. President Bush's nomination of Clarence Thomas was consequential to the new black pseudo-conservative movement. Many justices were available, but Thomas was selected because he was ideologically opposite of his predecessor, Thurgood Marshall. Clarence Thomas is part of a group of black conservatives who oppose a civil rights agenda in the United States. Instead, their goal has been to move black America from its historical liberal left position to that of the conservative right. This pseudo-conservative right is reactionary and only serves to critique progress and liberal approaches to black American socioeconomic injustices. This reactionary, non-solution-based position is precisely why conservatism has low support among black Americans. None of the wealthy conservative foundations like the Olin Foundation, the Scaife Foundation, the Bradley Foundation, and the Heritage Foundation have created any bold programs for black advancement. Instead of proactive solutions, today's conservatives would rather reactively trash the liberal progressive agenda.
And I have used my platform, my voice, to speak out against what is ultimately a big lie, right? This is all built upon the idea that black Americans are being gunned unarmed by a police officer. We're just peacefully, doing our business, and a police officer sees us and they come up to us and they want to shoot us and they want to kill us. And that's a lie. There is no systemic racism. There is no law. There is nothing that says that I can't do something as a black person that you can do.
Do you remember this? You told me the only black face you could see in the whole audience was your makeup artist. I believe that's what you said, and she was in the front row, right? A lot of white kids love rap.
Yes.
Explain that. What does that say to you? What's the message of it? What's the bigger picture of it?
I don't want to be bashed because I don't want to sound like I'm on the wrong if there is a side, but I thought that was clearly a message that there was no such thing as racism.
Look at my African-American over here. Look at him. Are you the greatest? Do you know what I'm talking about?
You can't figure out when America was great. Look at this. If you can't remember the 1990s when a looking cause off a dope fiend shit with no rubber and didn't catch nothing. We was 13 years old, off dope fiends. This shit in 89, 1990s. A whole lot of them dope fiends. This shit was you looking mamas in your cover. After school in the 8th grade, we went over to Pebble Creek apartment and we got to go for Mexican Maria. We got off with no rubber and we didn't have to worry about getting burned back in them days. Looking, America was great back then. Looking, America have always been great. You can't remember now in time you seen a nigga hanging from a tree to try to make me think America ain't great. You can't remember now in time a nigga couldn't sit at the front of the bus. Don't come trying to tell me about some issue Dr. King them went through. I don't give a damn what happened.
The primary narratives of the Black conservative begin with the premise of a colorblind America. Black conservatives claim that federal court decisions and civil rights legislation of the 1960s have created a colorblind society. According to them, since America is now a colorblind society, it is counterproductive for blacks to view themselves as victims in need of unique help. Their second argument is that black people have failed to realize the prevalence of the colorblind society. They believe that since blacks cannot see we live in a post-racial society, they are unable to initiate self-help strategies to uplift themselves. We know that we do not live in a colorblind society, as indicated in a 2019 report by the Economic Policy Institute. This 2019 report shows multiple layers of racial inequities built into the market. The report concluded that America's most highly educated black workers are still less likely to be employed than their white counterparts. It also found blacks are less likely to be in a job that is consistent with their level of education, strongly suggesting that racial discrimination remains a factor in an otherwise tight labor market. Black workers are twice as likely to be unemployed as white workers. Another narrative that black conservatives push is that affirmative action programs have gone too far and now distort the achievements of successful black Americans. This particular narrative is an obsession for black conservatives. The thought of whites asking if they made it here by themselves or because of affirmative action makes black conservatives uneasy.
After 3 years of Yale Law School, graduation was nearing. But Clarence Thomas wasn't getting the offers he expected from prestigious law firms. He came to blame affirmative action for the rejection he felt.
Now I knew what a law degree from Yale was worth when it bore the taint of racial preference. I was humiliated and desperate.
I ain't gonna blame affirmative action for not getting a job when you never was offered the job for 100 years before, okay? The system was still there. The infrastructure for separation, discrimination was still there. It was still the segregated mindset of white America.
Black conservatives argue that legislative actions and judicial decisions eliminated America's culture of racism. They believe that blacks are obsessively clinging to our past victim status under American racism. The black conservatives' entire argument rests on the idea that we exist in a post-racial, colorblind society. The post-racial society argument doesn't have much evidence to support its claims of existence when tested against American behavioral studies today. Data shows racial discrimination happens regularly. Yet, despite the evidence, black conservatives continue to try to sell us the idea that we live in a post-racial America. The Pew Research Center conducted a series of surveys in 2019 and 2020 and found, quote, black Republicans are less likely than black Democrats to have strong ties to black identity and other black people, end quote.
What's your thought on Black Lives Matter?
What is it? What do you mean?
The idea is that there's this movement called Black Lives Matter, thinking that the rest of America didn't seem to understand that Black Lives Matter.
It just sounds weird. I didn't know that you put a name on it. It's not a name, it's not whatever. It's somebody got shot by police and for up reason. I am a young, black, rich. If that don't let you know that America understands Black matter these days, I don't know what it is. Don't come at me with that dumb man. My life matter, especially to my.
Do you separate yourself from it?
I don't feel connected to a damn thing that ain't got nothing to do with me. If you do, you crazy. You connected to this flag right. Cause I'm connected. I'm a gangbanger, man. I'm connected.
When Black Americans acquire wealth, it encourages conservatism. Wealthy blacks are elevated and acquire advantages over other members of the black community. Once rewarded, these blacks begin to identify with the status quo and the dominant society. These conservatives fully embrace capitalism and accept that some people will do well and many others will not. Successful black conservatives will do whatever it takes to defend the system, just as long as they continue to maintain privileges. The privileged lifestyle they experience encourages blacks to disassociate from other blacks and cultivate the culture of the dominant race. Blacks who do not have wealth are not free and must succumb to the labor market forces. Wealthy black conservatives put their private interests over the interest of the entire black population. Perhaps the freedom that comes from having significant capital deludes wealthy blacks into believing that they are different from other black people. Blacks with wealth should follow the path of Philip Payton Jr. Payton Jr. was a real estate mogul and the father of the Harlem Renaissance. Payton obtained housing for black occupants and allowed them to invest in the property. He provided black Americans with the blueprint of how black Americans should operate as capitalists and property owners. Payton did not have profit-driven tunnel vision. He put the needs of the race above personal gain. The Payton model should be applied today. Black Americans with wealth should lead the rest of Black America into prosperity. Individually, blacks are poor, but collectively, they represent a substantial block of purchasing power. Conceivably, what could better explain the mind state of the black conservative may be what W.E.B. Du Bois called double consciousness. Double consciousness is the psychological challenge black Americans face reconciling an African heritage with European socialization. Du Bois asserted that African Americans are struggling with a dual concept of self. The two identities conflict with each other and cause black Americans to experience an identity crisis. Du Bois referred to double consciousness as a peculiar sensation of looking at oneself through the eyes of others. Although Du Bois' hypothesis is not analyzed much today, his critique may not be far off. You have the dashiki-wearing Hotep who identifies with their African heritage on one side, and on the other, you have the MAGA hat-wearing black conservative who identifies with their American socialization and education. In the middle are the majority of blacks, vacillating back and forth between black and white identities depending on the space that they are in. When in a white space, one has to act appropriately white in speech and behavior. Anything outside of the appropriate behaviors can lead to an indictment of acting ghetto. When in black space, one has to act appropriately black in speech and behavior. Anything outside of those appropriate behaviors can lead to an indictment of being an Uncle Tom or an Oreo. Fluctuating back and forth is tiresome and begs for a solution to become an individual with one identity. The solution for black Americans is to decolonize their minds Decolonization will assist the process of bringing the conflicting identities together so they may exist as one. Black Americans cannot suddenly become African, but through DNA genetic tracing, Black Americans have a chance to identify where their genetic material primarily comes from. After genetic analysis, Black Americans can travel to the countries their genetic makeup comes from. Once there, an individual may learn customs, courtesies, and culture. This program would require support from various African countries. Reconciliation of the dual identities will allow Black Americans to be on the same page in the United States. In conclusion, Black conservatism is not a new thing. The ideas around Black conservatism have changed due to the forces of time and politics. Today's Black conservatives are far from their roots. They continue to embrace an idea of Black conservatism that is not solution-oriented. Their position has slowly gotten popular due to the money special interest groups pay Blacks to spread their message. Conservatives have gone into overdrive in their attempts to convert Blacks to their worldview. The new strategy is to use rap music and its superstars to parlay the message. Personalities like DJ Academics have promoted their agenda, and they have rewarded him handsomely. Arguably, the most successful rap artist of 2024, Sexy Red, has promoted the MAGA brand at Summer Jam with her Massa campaign of Make America Sexy Again.
But once he started getting Black people out of jail and giving people their free money, oh, baby, we love Trump. We need him back in office.
Yeah, that a little bit of free money goes a long way.
We need him back. Because, baby, them checks.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, them stimulus checks. Trump, we miss you.
Snoop Dogg has recently reversed his position on Trump and publicly stated, "I have nothing but love for Trump. I don't believe that this campaign will work, but I have continued to be surprised at the amount of people who buy into today's Black conservatism." Hey y'all, listen, High Velocity Philosophy is a brand new channel, and I'm just gonna do whatever I want on here. And if you like this kind of content, I really appreciate it if you liked, shared, and subscribed to this channel, all right? Peace.